sweeping voting rights bill. The Senate is set to vote on this expansive voting bill today. However, we're expecting that all the GOP leaders will be against this vote. Currently, the Democrats, Senator Joe Manchin is also against this vote. The GOP may be bringing in filibuster to make sure the vote doesn't go in the favor of the Democrats. Give me a little insight into what is exactly happening here and what is this filibuster everyone keeps on talking about?
So the filibuster basically is a delay tactic, in which a particular senator in this case would be speaking endlessly. Some of them can speak for hours and hours and hours just to delay any kind of a vote and eventually have it, tossed out. That's what a filibuster really is. It was introduced way back, when the Constitution was created. It was all written out as to what the legislative body would do and wouldn't do, et cetera, et cetera. And this was one of these, at that point, considered a safeguard, so that if a particular bill that was being forced through was not good for the people, then the opposing party could go ahead and deploy this delay tactic and engage in endless speeches, which would then lead to nowhere essentially, and then nothing would happen to the piece of legislation. That's what the GOP is intent on doing with this particular Voting Rights Act and bill that is before the Senate. They intend to do it for the infrastructure bill as well, as far as we understand. And, the Senate, the GOP right now, with Minority Leader Mitch McConnell sitting over there, making it very clear that whatever President Biden and the Democrats' agenda is, they do not intend to cooperate whatsoever. So it's been pretty clear that there's going to be bipartisan action. There's going to be partisan action over here, and the Republicans are simply not going to want to hand a victory to the Democrats in any way, form, or fashion. So that's essentially what the filibuster is. The Voting Rights Act is a very serious bill to be discussed, a very serious piece of legislation, what we've seen happening in various states.
Right.
Such as Texas and Georgia in particular, is what appears to be a denial to the minority groups in those states to be able to vote, because most of this is targeting things like people standing in line, people who go to the booth in person, stand in line. They cannot be handed a bottle of water if they're thirsty, if they're standing in scorching heat. They cannot be handed a sandwich to eat in case they've been standing for hours, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a very serious matter. It's an infringement in many eyes and in many shapes and fashions on the very democracy that we are witnessing right now.
So let me ask you, about 14 states that have passed these restrictive voting laws. When today doesn't go through for this voting rights bill, where do we land at this point? And do you see this becoming a huge issue in 2024?
Yes, it will be a huge issue. It's a huge issue now. What's happening is the GOP-run states are exercising their own, flexing their own muscles, if you will. It's the same thing with the COVID situation, where many states decided to defy the federal government and just go ahead and do what they want on their own. In our democracy, the states do have certain rights, certain flexibility. And so this is what they're trying to do. So basically, we're seeing a battle, as I see it, we're seeing a battle between the federal government, the executive branch, the legislative branch of the federal government, and the powers exhibited by the states. So there is also this whole struggle now as to who is really calling all the shots, the federal government, the federal legislature, or the states themselves, the state governors, the state legislators. This is what we're seeing right now play out. It is a good thing. It's also a terrible thing, because there has to be some kind of cohesion, especially in a matter like voting rights. All right, that should fall under the national purview, where there should be a uniform voting code for every single state. You can't have states just running away on their own, sort of like errant satellites, and deciding whatever they want. At least that's my understanding of the U.S. Constitution, and this can be a flaw, a big flaw. So I think that's why the voting rights bill that they introduced, the Democrats have introduced, is so critical. However, it's prudent to point out here that even Democrats, you mentioned Joe Manchin, who's a conservative Democrat from West Virginia. There are also moderate Democrats within the Democratic Party who are also resisting busting the filibuster. They don't want to rid the nation of the filibuster or the executive branch or the legislative branch of the filibuster, because they see what will happen is if you get rid of the filibuster in future, if one party or the other gains full control of the Senate with a greater majority than we have right now, that can be a problem as well, because if you have no way to delay legislation being passed, if a party is there in power and has enough seats and enough votes, the 60 vote mandate, they'll just do whatever they want to and just bully their way through, as it were.
Right. Such a huge issue in the country. Well, only time will tell what happened to these voting rights. Now, the big issue that the Biden administration is facing is the issue of infrastructure. My first question to you is, could you describe what you think infrastructure is, as there have been a lot of conversations about that? And also, why can't we find a bipartisanship on this really big $4 trillion infrastructure bill that he's trying to pass?
Because it precisely involves $4 trillion. And in the Republican eyes, for decades, for the longest time, Republicans are resistant to spending, to government spending, to be more accurate. However, the Biden administration is on the right track because infrastructure involves bridges, road transportation, commuter railroads, tunnels, highways, okay, just plain highways. All of that affects transportation of goods and services. The United States right now is lacking because our infrastructure is crumbling. We all know that for years. Any of us can just go out on the highway right now, cross any bridge, and you can see with your own eyes the decay that is setting in. Just go in New York City, for instance. Take a look at the bridges in New York. Not to put New York City down by any means, but take a look. I live here in New Jersey. I commute to New York. Take a look at what's happening. Anybody, anywhere in the country. I keep going to California, for instance. I see a lot of decay setting in on bridges, highways, roadways over there too. Think about it. China, other countries around the world, all of Asia, in fact, a great number of countries in Asia, a great number of countries in Europe have superb highways, superb transportation facilities, superb train facilities. All of that leads to speedy, efficient commerce, business, okay, trade. If we have an infrastructure that's crumbling, we're going to fall way behind the rest of the world in economics and being an economic power. So we're going to be falling way down the totem pole, if you will, and we can't call ourselves a superpower anymore if our infrastructure is crumbling. And so this is what the Biden administration is saying right now. You need this nearly $4 trillion, Band-Aid, but it's not just going to be a Band-Aid, it's going to be a rebuilding of the infrastructure. And what the Biden administration is explaining is it's going to create jobs, it's going to create supply chains, it's going to lead to greater commerce for this country to compete not just within this country, but around the world and become, we'll once again be a formidable superpower. The Republicans do not believe in spending. They want to do everything with the minimum required federal spending, which in this case is not going to work, in my opinion. And I think the Biden administration now is trying to push this case as far as they can.
It seems like the Biden administration is having a little tough time handling GOP leaders, something that we had predicted could happen in this administration. Moving on, I'd like to talk to you about reopening. You're a political commentator, you're watching what's happening in politics, you're watching what's happening in the economy, you're just, observing all of these trends. Do you think reopening is too fast right now?
Yes and no. I think it's about time we open up because we have enough people vaccinated. However, we're not going to meet the goal. Just today's news breaking out that President Biden had set the goal of vaccinating at least 70% of all adults in the United States by the 4th of July. They've now come out to say they don't think it's going to happen, which is okay, but at the same time, not okay. And I'll explain that because we now have this new virulent, very rapid-moving Delta virus, first discovered in India, which is turning out to be more transmissible, more infectious, and those who are not vaccinated are the problem. Those who are vaccinated, apparently, especially with the Pfizer and the Moderna doses, they don't seem to be affected by this yet, okay? But if the unvaccinated start getting infected with the Delta virus, we're going to have a problem. Because at that point, it could mutate even further into something more transmissible And then this whole business of getting vaccinated and trying to beat the pandemic, achieving herd immunity, is going to be defeated altogether. We don't want to go back to lockdowns, etc. Europe today, Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of Britain, who had delayed the reopening over there, says they may rethink and reopen by the 5th of July, that is to international travel and all the rest of it. Britain has been locked down and has not been allowing international travelers as yet. And they rethought the whole process because of this virus, but now may rethink allowing it finally. But the whole world is hinging itself and its success to reopening commerce and flights and borders and all the rest of it on how we treat this virus, how we vaccinate our populations, and therefore achieve this herd immunity, which is so essential.
Right. What is going to be the impact on the economy? I'm guessing it's going to be good right now, but if this variant spreads more and the unvaccinated people stay unvaccinated, what happens?
Very tough to say, but I can tell you one thing. Here in the United States, people do not have the patience to go through another lockdown. So here in the US, we have an especially bigger problem. And in fact, the CDC director, Rochelle Walensky, has been sitting on the sidelines on this, if you notice. While the administration has said we're going to go ahead with the opening, various states have said we're doing the opening, we're fine, we're going to be okay. I suspect she's a little more cautious, not a little more, but a lot more cautious, probably a lot more worried about where this variant is going to lead. Nobody actually can predict anything about this new variant. If you listen to all the experts, the infectious disease experts around the world, none of them is hazarding a guess as to what could happen in the future because they don't know. It's as simple as that. What I'm telling you is as good a guess as they would be making as medical experts. I am not the medical expert, but I can tell you that I'm guessing as well as they are guessing, or they are guessing as well as I'm guessing about what will happen. So nobody really knows. I can tell you, though, there is no patience in this country. Should there be another outbreak, if we have a setback, which I hope we do not, and I think everybody hopes we do not, there's going to be no patience to go through another lockdown or shutdown or whatever, and it could actually backfire. So it's very difficult to predict. I think we're going to have to live with this virus, do our best. I think the messaging is going to have to change about vaccination. We're going to somehow have to get a message out to the younger people who are the ones most resistant, especially those between the teen groups going up to, say, in the 20s, the 20, 28, 29 age group, who have been resistant to getting vaccinations and who may have had COVID and think that they're totally immune to everything. That's the group that we have to now start sending out messages to educate them. Look, we still need you guys to get vaccinated because otherwise we're not going to defeat this pandemic. So there's going to have to be a whole new rethinking of how to target the age group that is most resistant to getting vaccinated. Not to say that many adults are not either. I mean, seniors are not either. I personally, it's funny, I was in a supermarket yesterday and I met a couple of seniors who still have not gotten their vaccinations, and I asked them why. They said, because we don't believe in it. We've lived through a lot of viruses and diseases and we don't believe in it. So there are a lot of older folks too who just don't believe in getting vaccinated.
But a lot of these red states see low vaccination rates, GOP states, whatever you want to call them. Do you think the governors now should get involved and start pushing for vaccination? I mean, it's become a political issue. Why isn't there more push on these governors or state officials or local officials to make a change?
Governors are not going to, I guess some Democratic governors might. The Republican governors you can write off, they're not going to do it. In fact, you can write off many of the Democratic governors as well. For instance, in California, there's been the recall effort against Gavin Newsom, Governor Gavin Newsom of California. New Jersey has a gubernatorial race coming up, so there's going to be a governor's race here. I'm just giving two examples. There are political, decisions to be made in various states, Democrat and Republican. I don't think any governor that sees his or her own position at stake is going to want to take this on head on anymore, and rather leave it to local officials, to municipalities, to counties maybe, to individual businesses. Now, most of the states are leaving decisions to individual businesses to take action and decide what they want to do. And many businesses are doing that. The big ones are not doing it, the Walmarts and the big, grocery store chains and things like that. But the small businesses are taking their own decisions individually. I see many restaurants that still say, please walk in with a mask. And then once you're seated, you can do whatever you want when you're consuming food or drinking or whatever. The same thing with many small shops, etc. On the other hand, I also see a lot of responsibility built into citizens who have been through the whole process of the pandemic, like you and I have, and who are wearing a mask. Just as you and I came on to this program right now, you were wearing a mask. I asked you why you wore a mask, and you said it's habitual and you want to be safe. It's the same with me. I do the same thing. So individuals will exercise their own mandates. Businesses will. Governors will not get involved in my prediction.
Right. I have 3 more questions left here for you. The first one, New York City, where we are located right now, and your neighboring state, is having a really crucial election today. It's the primaries, and for the mayor of New York City, there are a lot of candidates running. We are seeing Asian candidates, African American, Latino. It's quite a diverse, group of candidates. How are you looking at that race today, and what are your expectations?
Very exciting race, actually, especially the Democratic primary. The Republican primary, I mean, yes, also okay, but I think the Democratic one is the most interesting with the most diverse field of candidates. You have Andrew Yang over there. You have the Latino candidates. You've got white candidates, black candidates. You've got everybody, and that's fantastic. I think it's so wonderful to see. Really, the most diverse city, or one of the most diverse cities in the world, holding a mayoral election. I don't think, as most people are predicting, I don't think we're going to get definitive results. This is going to be a very highly contested election. There's going to be a lot of back and forth on the counting of votes, etc. There are new systems that have been put in place and that type of thing. You also have a very diverse field for the city council. You have a number of South Asian Americans, Indian Americans who are running also. A couple of Sikhs I've seen over there who are running for the first time. It's going to be a very interesting mix. And New York City has become a much more diverse city than when I used to be there back in the 1970s. It was always a diverse city, but so much more so now. And it's very nice to see. At the time I was there, we would never have, when I lived in the city, we would never have seen this many candidates of diverse backgrounds and diverse ethnicities running. When I lived in Queens back then, which again was the most diverse borough back then, still is the most borough in New York City. Donald Trump lived in Queens too, by the way, back then. So you can imagine back in those days how, Queens looked like, and then New York City in the larger picture. But right now, this mayoral race is going to be extremely exciting. I will not make any predictions. I think we'll eventually come down to 2 or 3 candidates by later tonight once the counting begins. But as I said, you're going to see a lot of back and forth in terms of numbers. And we might not know the results of the primary for a few days or maybe a couple of weeks or so.
Yeah, we're hearing about 2 weeks perhaps for the election result, but what a race. And New York is the largest city in this country, so all the eyes are on it. Another big issue that has come out in the news today is a new release video from the January 6th attack on the Capitol, which actually showcased Proud Boys planning what they were about to do at the Capitol right before they all marched in. There have been several links to far-right groups and on this January 6th commission that they have set up. What are your comments on this? Are we going to find more and more relation of these far-right groups with this event?
They definitely were a part of it. They definitely planned it. And a lot of people just went along for the ride. But there's no question about it. This was a conspiracy. This was an attack on the heart of democracy. We all know that. And it could not have happened in a haphazard fashion. When you look at some of the video that's coming out, and actually, when you look at some of the analysis of the video, when you look at how the attacks occurred, how there were people positioned in strategic locations on the steps of the Capitol, how that front line of police officers, Capitol Police, were there resisting everything, and then you had all kinds of incendiary devices, all kinds of mace-like devices, all kinds of tear gas-like devices, very sophisticated weaponry, if you will. They may not be weapons in the traditional sense, but weaponry to disable that police force so they could, advance into the Capitol itself. Spoke of very militaristic approaches. And that's frightening. That's really scary when your own, the seat of government, the seat of the legislative branch of government could be invaded and, be violated in this fashion. So there is no question in my mind that there were far right groups, or whatever you want to call them, whatever type of, basically, they were terrorists. Let's call it what it is. Let's call a spade a spade. These were terrorists. Anybody who attacks the very heart of democracy is a terrorist by definition. And that's what I see them as. There's nobody who went there with any valiant effort or anything like that. We lost a police officer from New Jersey, and he lost his life protecting the Capitol. We lost other people. We've seen police officers being run over, stampeded, mercilessly, put in chokeholds and things like that. You have it all on video, and this is not something that our democracy should tolerate.
Yes, definitely not, but truly a dark day in the democracy, January 6th. My last question to you has to deal with the fact that hundreds and hundreds of migrant children, unaccompanied, are still at the border. They're in these shelters, they're waiting for their parents, they are depressed, they don't have all the facilities available to them. It's a really tragic scenario. I would like your comments on this, and also what should be done at the border.
This is a very difficult question to answer, but I'll try my best to answer it. I think, first of all the children that are being brought to the border are being brought there by people smugglers. This is not parents bringing them and just leaving them over there. These are smugglers, professional smugglers who are charging exorbitant fees from parents and others to bring these kids over and promise them they'll be transported across the border and then be able to reunite with family and friends here in the United States. It's a scam. It's a racket. There's got to be a concerted effort, which was why Kamala Harris had made that trip to South America, to those particular nations where much of this trouble has been occurring, to assure them that the Biden administration would now be bringing in financial assistance to help those countries deal with their local economic issues, etc., which is driving everybody to send people away, extreme poverty, things like that, driving people to move at least their children northward for a better life and perhaps for the families in the future. But this is mainly driven, what we're seeing at the southern border is being driven by people smugglers, basically organized crime. And so therefore, once again, the US is going to have to be alert to organized crime. In fact, the cartels, the drug cartels are now involved in this. Many of the drug cartel members have crossed into US territory, which is more frightening than everything else that's happening. And nobody's talking about that right now, but we have the drug cartels from the Central American states, the Southern American states, have begun to infiltrate the US southern border, and they are now operating within the United States. That should frighten all of us. We need to beef up law enforcement down there. We need to have our law enforcement visit those nations, in fact, to work with their law enforcement and to start to nip the situation in the bud there before it gets to our border. You'll see this will all stop if we take that type of action. But it's going to need some, cooperation with those nations, and we'll have to have law enforcement itself on all sides of the borders to work on this together.
Such a sad scenario with these children. I hope they're able to find their parents somehow or the other. Thank you so much for your time today on ITV Gold.